Vice President Kamala Harris is being criticized for opposing voter ID laws because she says rural people cannot get photocopies of their ID cards.
In some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove you are who you are. Well, there are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't. There's no Kinko's, there's no Office Max near them.
Last month, President Biden selected Harris to lead the administration's effort to expand access to the ballot box. Former President Donald Trump easily won the straw poll at the Conservative Political Action Conference this weekend in Texas. The former president capturing 70% of the ballots cast and firing up the crowd there.
With the help of everyone here today, we will defeat the radical left, the socialist Marxists, and the critical race theorists. We will secure our borders. We will stop left-wing cancel culture. We will restore free speech and fair elections, and we will make America great again.
Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis came in second in that straw poll at 21%. Let's bring in senior political analyst Brit Hume. Good evening, Brit. I want to talk to you about the former president and where he stands as far as the power in this party, not just perhaps at CPAC, but within the Republican Party.
Well, Brett, I think he's going to be with us a while longer, maybe a good while longer. The strength in that straw poll there, now that's the most conservative elements of the party. It isn't necessarily the sentiments of the entire party, but there are not many Republican politicians today who want to speak out against Donald Trump, not because they think that he should lead their ticket in 2024 or that they can win with him, but because they believe that his following is still sufficiently strong in the party that they dare not oppose him publicly. That is, I think, where he now stands. When he said in that speech, you heard we just heard some of the last phrases from that speech. He was talking about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's not entirely clear if by we he means the party and him at the head of it, or if he just means the party. I think an awful lot of things are going to happen between now and 2024, which will determine whether he's in any shape to run or not. But he's still there, and he's still at the center of things, and he's going to make news and have attention wherever he goes. That's the fact of life for Republicans.
Right, and you mentioned that speech. Let's take another little piece of that. This is, again, the former president at CPAC.
I was banned by sleazebags. I was banned by bad people. They're far worse. I don't say I'm perfect, but they're far worse than I am, I will tell you. They are far worse. In other words, the entire system was rigged against the American people and rigged against a fair, decent, and honest election.
Brett, I've talked to a lot of Republicans who absolutely love Trump policies. They love them. But they had a problem with Donald Trump, the man. They also had, as far as what he did with Twitter and how he talked about things, but also Donald Trump on January 6th in the wake of that. As he talks more and more about the stolen election, how big a problem is that for Republicans as a party?
I think it's a very big problem, Brett. I mean, I think that I saw one poll not long ago that reflects what you're just talking about, in which it was people, and a majority of Republicans said they would like to win with his policies. A smaller number said they'd like to win with him leading the way. And I think that's basically where the matter now stands. I think a lot of rank-and-file Republican politicians and a lot of rank-and-file Republican voters wouldn't mind a bit if he went away. They could then pick up his agenda and run on it. The Biden administration to date seems to have left them plenty of opportunities. The former president outlined a lot of them in his speech on all kinds of issues, crime, immigration, and so on down the list. And so I think the party feels it could be in a strong position. They're afraid to buck him, but they're afraid he'll lead them to a defeat, which is what they feared the first time. And then he did lead them to defeat the second time. So that's, I think, where they are. But it shows no signs of going away. We'll see what happens if, he gets indicted or something like that. That might change the calculus, or he needs to spend his time keeping his businesses together. We'll see about that as well.
Quickly, you mentioned the Biden administration. They seem to be giving Republicans some low-hanging fruit with the border crisis. There's some questions about the economy, obviously, and about crime across the country. But Vice President Harris, you just heard that, talking about rural voters not being able to get a photocopy of their ID. There are now 70+% of Americans who say photo ID for voting is okay by them.
This is a tricky issue for the Democrats. They're trying to make the most of it. They're trying to label Republicans as people who want to suppress the vote. But a number of the things that the Republicans want to do in the laws they're passing across the country and so on are things that are popular, and voter ID is very high on that list, Brett, as you suggest. I think it's politically really stupid to come out and criticize voter ID. And I think, there are obviously people in the Biden White House who kind of wonder whether having Kamala Harris out front on a lot of these issues has turned out to be a very good move. She seems at times lighter than air.
Brit, as always, thank you.